Julian Marks stared at the lines of code dancing across his monitor, the soft blue light illuminating his face in the otherwise dark home office. Rain tapped gently against the window, creating a soothing rhythm that had always helped him focus. His coffee mug, "World's Best Dad," in bold letters, sat half-empty beside his keyboard. 15 years of marriage to Samantha, 3 beautiful children, and a comfortable suburban life in Wellington Grove had given him everything he thought he wanted. At 42, Julian had built a respectable software development company from the ground up, providing well for his family while maintaining the simple life he cherished. Tonight was like any other, working late while Samantha attended her book club. He stretched and checked his watch, nearly midnight. His wife should be home soon. The familiar creaking of the back porch steps made him smile. But then, instead of the front door opening, he heard something unexpected: laughter. Samantha's laughter, but with an edge to it he rarely heard directed at him anymore. Julian moved toward the window, curiosity pulling him forward. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and through the partially open patio doors, her voice carried clearly through the night air. "He has no idea," Samantha said, her voice low but unmistakable. Julian froze, his hand still on the curtain. The phone was pressed against her ear, her back to the house as she stood under the patio light. Julian's completely clueless. Always has been. Her cruel laughter sliced through him like a blade, swift and silent. His fingers trembled against the fabric of the curtain, but he didn't make a sound. 15 years of trust crumbled in an instant, but Julian didn't rage or cry out. Instead, he listened, his analytical mind already documenting every word, every inflection. All these years, working late nights, building his little company, and he never once questioned anything, she continued, unaware of her audience. Julian's heart hammered in his chest, but his face remained expressionless. The programmer in him was already processing, analyzing the inconsistencies in their shared narrative. He'd always trusted her completely, perhaps that had been his first mistake. The world he thought was solid beneath his feet was suddenly quicksand, and he was sinking fast. But Julian wouldn't thrash or panic. That wasn't his way. He would observe. He would plan. He would understand exactly what he was dealing with before making a single move. "Ethan, I miss you," Samantha whispered into the phone, and Julian felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. Ethan Blackwell, his best friend since college. The man who had been Julian's groomsman at their wedding. The family's financial advisor who came over for barbecues every summer. "The kids keep asking when Uncle Ethan is coming back from his business trip." She laughed again, this time softer, intimate. "All 3 are yours, you know? I've always known it." The words hung in the night air like poison. Julian didn't move, didn't breathe. His mind raced through calculations. Nathan was 15, Isla 13, Leo 10. 15 years of marriage. 3 children. None of them his. The magnitude of the deception was staggering, but Julian didn't collapse. He didn't storm outside to confront her. Instead, he silently stepped back from the window, returned to his desk, and sat down in front of his computer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before he opened a new document and began typing. This wasn't a time for emotion. This was a time for strategy. Over the next week, Julian moved through his life like a ghost in his own home. He kissed Samantha goodbye in the mornings, helped the children with homework in the evenings, and smiled at all the right moments during dinner conversations. But his eyes now saw what had been there all along. Nathan's piercing blue eyes, so unlike his own brown ones, but exactly like Ethan's. Isla's distinctive laugh that had always reminded him of someone he couldn't quite place, now he recognized it as Ethan's. Leo's natural talent for numbers, something Julian had proudly attributed to his own influence, now revealed itself as a genetic inheritance from a man who majored in finance while Julian studied computer science. That night, after everyone was asleep, Julian quietly pulled out old family albums. Every photo now told a different story. The way Samantha leaned slightly away from him in their wedding photos. The strange familiarity in how Ethan held baby Nathan in christening pictures. The family vacation to Aspen where Ethan had, coincidentally, been staying at the same resort. All those emergency calls that pulled Samantha away for hours, sometimes overnight. The business trips that seemed to align with Ethan's schedule. Julian felt like a fool, but he wouldn't stay one. He carefully replaced the albums and went to bed beside the woman who had orchestrated the greatest betrayal of his life, his mind already calculating his next move. "Julian, dear, I brought your favorite cookies," his mother Margot announced, letting herself in with the key she'd always had. At 68, she remained elegantly put together, her silver hair perfectly styled, her clothes expensive but understated. She'd always been the picture of upper-middle-class respectability in Wellington Grove. Julian accepted her embrace automatically, noticing for the first time how she subtly assessed the house, her eyes cataloging everything like an auditor. "Have you heard from Ethan recently? Such a shame about his divorce last year. I always thought he and Catherine were perfectly matched, but I suppose these things happen." Julian watched his mother's face carefully as she arranged cookies on a plate, her movements precise and deliberate. "He's been such a good friend to you all these years. And so wonderful with the children." Something in her tone made Julian pause. There was affection there, but something else too. A proprietary note, as if she were speaking of an investment that had performed well. "Samantha mentioned he's been so helpful with your finances. Such a blessing to have him in your lives." Julian smiled, pouring them both coffee. "Yes, Mother. We're very fortunate." But as they chatted about neighborhood gossip and Margot's garden club politics, Julian felt a dawning realization. His mother wasn't just making conversation. She was checking on her puppet strings, making sure they were still attached. The offices of Kane and Associates occupied the top floor of Wellington Grove's only high-rise building. Julian sat across from Viola Kane, watching as she reviewed the file he'd brought her. At 55, she had a reputation as the most feared divorce attorney in 3 counties, known for her surgical precision in court and her ability to dismantle opposing arguments without raising her voice. Her office was minimalist, no family photos, just diplomas and a single orchid. "Mr. Marks, this is quite extensive preliminary work," she said finally, looking up at him through steel-rimmed glasses. "Most clients come to me emotional, sometimes hysterical. You've brought me financial records, phone logs, and a timeline spanning 15 years. Julian met her gaze steadily. "I'm thorough." Viola nodded slowly, something like approval in her eyes. "You're not here for a divorce, are you, Mr. Marks?" "Not primarily, at least." Julian's expression didn't change. "I'm here to bury them. Legally, financially, socially. I want to understand my options." Viola Kane closed the file, her decision made. "Then you've come to the right place. But I should warn you, revenge is expensive." Julian didn't hesitate. "I can afford it." Viola nodded once, then pressed her intercom. "Cancel my appointments for the afternoon. Mr. Marks and I have planning to do." The private investigator's report arrived 3 weeks later, delivered personally to Julian's office downtown rather than his home. The manila envelope was thick with documents, photos, and transcripts. Julian closed his office door, cleared his desk of everything else, and began to read. What emerged was far worse than he had imagined. His mother, Margot, hadn't just been aware of the affair, she'd orchestrated it from the beginning. Emails between Margot and Samantha dated back to before the wedding, revealing that his mother had always seen Julian as the safe choice while believing Ethan was more deserving of Samantha. After the marriage, Margot had actively facilitated their relationship, creating alibis and opportunities. She'd even helped arrange secret DNA tests when each child was born, confirming what Samantha had suspected, that none of Julian's children were biologically his. The betrayal was complete, a perfect triangle of deception. His wife, his best friend, his mother. For 17 years, they had maintained this elaborate charade, laughing behind his back while spending his money. Julian read every page twice, memorizing details, dates, locations. When he finally looked up, the sun had set. His office was dark except for his desk lamp. He should have felt devastated. Instead, he felt strangely calm, as if he'd finally solved a particularly difficult programming problem. He knew exactly what he needed to do. Autumn settled over Wellington Grove, painting the trees in brilliant oranges and reds. Julian maintained the perfect facade of normalcy, kissing Samantha goodbye each morning, attending Nathan's soccer games, helping Isla with her science project, listening to Leo practice piano. He complimented his wife on her new haircut, paid for with his credit card on the same day she'd met Ethan at a hotel 2 towns over. He thanked his mother for watching the children during their parents' night out, an evening Samantha had actually spent with Ethan while Julian worked late, unaware. He clapped Ethan on the back when he stopped by to review their investments. Meetings that always somehow required Samantha's presence but not Julian's. Every motion, every word from Julian was calculated now. "I'll be home late, love," he told Samantha one morning, kissing her cheek. "Big project at work." She nodded absently, already texting on her phone. Julian watched her for a moment, remembering when he had loved this woman with his entire being. Now all he felt was a cold determination. The calendar on the refrigerator caught his eye, 3 weeks until Thanksgiving. Perfect timing. Samantha looked up, catching his gaze. "Everything okay?" she asked. Julian smiled. "Everything's perfect," he replied. For once, he wasn't lying. Dante Rivera's office in the financial district of Boston was understated but exuded quiet wealth. The man himself, with his salt and pepper hair and custom-tailored suit, had a reputation for financial wizardry that sometimes skirted the edges of legality without quite crossing the line. "Your situation is unusual, Mr. Marks," Rivera said after Julian had explained what he needed. "But not impossible to address." Over the next 6 hours, they created a complex web of financial protection. Julian's company, currently valued at nearly $30 million, would be restructured. Assets would be moved into offshore trusts. Shell companies would be established. By the time they finished, Julian's apparent net worth would seem substantially reduced on paper, while the majority of his assets would be secure from divorce proceedings. "And the potential buyer?" Julian asked. Rivera nodded. "I have several clients who would be interested in acquiring your company at a premium, with an understanding that you would establish a new venture overseas afterward." Julian studied the documents before him, each page representing another strand in the web he was weaving. "How quickly can all this be implemented?" Rivera's eyebrows raised slightly. "You're certain about this timeline? Most clients take months to decide." Julian's voice was steady. "I've had 15 years to think about it. I just didn't know it until recently." Thanksgiving arrived with picture-perfect holiday weather, clear skies, crisp air, and just enough chill to justify the fireplace. Julian had insisted on hosting this year, inviting not just family but influential friends from throughout Wellington Grove. Judge Harriman and his wife, the hospital board director Dr. Chan, the mayor and his family, the headmaster from the children's private school. 22 guests in total, including Ethan, who had accepted with his usual easy charm. Samantha had been surprised by Julian's sudden interest in entertaining but had thrown herself into the preparations. The dining room looked magnificent, fine china, crystal glasses, sterling silver, and autumn-themed centerpieces running down the long table. Name cards marked each place setting, and beneath each napkin lay a sealed cream envelope. Only Julian knew what they contained. As everyone took their seats, Julian remained standing at the head of the table, champagne flute in hand. The room quieted expectantly. "Before we begin, I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "To truth." Glasses raised around the table. "Life is full of illusions and deceptions," Julian continued, his eyes moving slowly from face to face. "Today I'm thankful for clarity, for seeing things as they truly are." He smiled. "Now, if everyone would please look under their napkins. I've prepared something special for each of you." Chaos erupted as envelopes were opened around the table. Samantha's face drained of color as she stared at DNA test results proving none of the children were Julian's. Ethan found himself looking at bank records showing how he had systematically embezzled from Julian's accounts over the years, along with hotel receipts and photographs documenting his affair. Margot's envelope contained emails and text messages revealing her role in orchestrating the deception, along with evidence that she had misappropriated funds from her late husband's estate that should have gone to Julian. The other guests received various pieces of the puzzle, enough for each to understand the full picture of betrayal unfolding before them. "Julian, this isn't," Samantha began, her voice shaking. Julian cut her off with a raised hand. "No more lies, Samantha. Not today." His voice remained calm, almost conversational. 15 years. 3 children. My best friend. My own mother. He looked around the stunned table. "I considered a more private reckoning, but then I realized secrets have power only in darkness. I prefer clarity." Judge Harriman cleared his throat uncomfortably. Several guests began to rise. "Please stay," Julian said. "Dinner is served. I've gone to considerable expense. It would be a shame to waste it." With perfect timing, servers began bringing in the first course. Julian sat down and unfolded his napkin as if nothing unusual had happened. "The butternut squash soup is excellent," he commented to no one in particular. By the following Monday, Julian's company had been sold to a Singapore-based tech conglomerate for $38 million. The sale had been arranged weeks earlier, the paperwork already complete. Julian signed the final documents at 9 a.m., was out of his office by 10, and on a private jet by noon. He left behind 3 letters with Viola Kane, one for each child, to be delivered when they turned 21. His house in Wellington Grove, now empty of anything he cared about, would go on the market in a week. His cars, artwork, and most of his possessions would be sold at auction. By the time Samantha's divorce petition was filed the following day, Julian Marks had effectively ceased to exist in America. No social media accounts, no forwarding address, no way to contact him. He had taken nothing but clothing, essential documents, and the offshore accounts Dante Rivera had established for him. As the plane crossed the Pacific, Julian watched the sunset from his window seat. For the first time in months, he felt something other than cold determination. Not happiness, that was still too distant, but perhaps its cousin, freedom. The person he had been, trusting, naive Julian Marks, had died the night he overheard his wife's phone call. Who he would become remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, he would never be anyone's fool again. The plane banked slightly, heading toward a new continent, a new life, and Julian did not look back. 7 years passed. Julian Chin, formerly Marx, stood at the window of his corner office 67 floors above Singapore's Marina Bay. At 49, he cut an impressive figure, lean and fit from daily martial arts training, his formerly untamed hair now closely cropped, designer glasses framing his face. Marx Innovations had grown from a small startup to one of Asia's most aggressive tech companies, recently valued at over $3 billion. Julian had methodically rebuilt himself, shedding his old identity like a snake sheds its skin. Every morning began with training. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had become both therapy and philosophy. Evenings were devoted to blockchain innovation, artificial intelligence development, and strategic acquisitions. He had no photographs in his office, no mementos of his previous life. His executive assistant, Ming, entered after a brief knock. "The Wellington Grove proposal is ready for your review, Mr. Chen." Julian nodded without turning from the window. "And the assessment of their financial situation?" "As expected, sir. The tech park is failing. Most major tenants have already relocated. The town council is desperate for investment." Julian finally turned, his expression neutral. "Prepare the jet. We leave tomorrow." Ming hesitated. "Will you be traveling under your former name, sir?" Julian considered this for a moment. "No. It's time Julian Marx returned properly." He paused. "Contact our PR team. I want my original name restored publicly before we land. It's time Wellington Grove learned who's about to become their landlord." The Wellington Grove Tribune ran the headline, "Native Son Returns AS Billionaire Savior." Julian's purchase of the failing tech park, the town's largest employer, was characterized as a homecoming story of almost mythic proportions. Few remembered the scandal of his departure a decade earlier. Those who did kept silent, watching with fascination as Julian Marx systematically bought property after property. The old downtown theater, the country club, the private school his children had attended. Within 6 months, he owned nearly 40% of the commercial real estate in Wellington Grove. He established the headquarters for Marx Innovations' North American operations in the gleaming new tower that replaced the outdated tech park buildings. Local unemployment plummeted. Housing prices soared. Julian himself remained largely unseen, working from the penthouse office of his tower, leaving the day-to-day operations to his executive team. When he did appear at charity galas or town functions, he was unfailingly polite but distant, his once familiar face now bearing the subtle marks of cosmetic enhancement that gave him an almost ageless quality. People whispered about him, the mysterious billionaire who had returned to his hometown not as a prodigal son but as its new master. No one mentioned Samantha or Ethan in his presence. No one dared ask about his mother. Julian Marx had transcended scandal. He had become legend. Samantha Davis, she had reverted to her maiden name after the divorce, hurried through the rain toward the strip mall medical clinic where she worked as a receptionist. At 52, she still maintained traces of the beauty that had once been her currency, but financial stress and social isolation had taken their toll. The scandal had destroyed her standing in Wellington Grove. No alimony had been forthcoming. Julian's financial maneuvering had been too thorough. She had been forced to sell the house, watching as Julian's attorneys took most of the proceeds to repay misappropriated funds. 3 towns over, no one knew her story, which was exactly how she needed it. Across town, Ethan Blackwell sat in his cubicle at Regional Accounting Associates, preparing tax returns for small businesses. The embezzlement evidence Julian had exposed had cost him his financial license, his reputation, and nearly sent him to prison. Only a plea deal had kept him free, though free was a relative term for a man who would be paying restitution for the rest of his working life. In a modest retirement community on the outskirts of Wellington Grove, Margot Marks lived on a strictly controlled allowance from a trust Julian had established. Her calls to the Marks Innovations headquarters were logged but never returned. Her letters were filed but remained unopened. Each month, the same amount appeared in her account, enough to live simply but without luxury. Each month, she called to beg for more. Each month, silence was the only response. Nathan Marks Davis, now 25, sat across from Julian in the executive dining room atop Marks Tower. "I got your letter when I turned 21, he said, his blue eyes, so like Ethan's, studying the man who had raised him for 15 years. "It took me 2 more years to work up the courage to contact you." Julian nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "And your siblings?" "Isla got hers last year. She's still processing it. Leo gets his next year when he turns 21. Nathan hesitated. The scholarships to MIT, the internship offers that seemed to appear from nowhere. "That was all you, wasn't it?" Julian sipped his water. "You earned them. I merely removed obstacles." The younger man shook his head in wonder. "All these years, I thought you hated us. That you left because of us." Julian's composure cracked slightly, genuine emotion showing through. "I never hated you, Nathan. Any of you. The circumstances of your birth weren't your fault." He paused. "I left because staying would have turned me into someone I didn't want to be. Someone consumed by bitterness." Nathan studied him for a long moment. "And now," Julian's smile was small but real, "now I've built something worth sharing. If you're interested." Nathan extended his hand across the table. "When can I start?" 3 months later, Isla joined their weekly dinners. A year after that, Leo came too. Not as heirs reclaiming a birthright, but as young adults choosing a mentor, a guide, and eventually, a father. Nathan proved himself a natural leader, overseeing Marks Innovations' cybersecurity division with a strategic mind that impressed even Julian's most senior executives. Isla, with her psychology degree and wellness certification, developed the company's groundbreaking employee mental health program, making Marks Innovations a case study in workplace well-being. Leo, still finishing his computer science degree, had already patented 2 blockchain innovations under Julian's mentorship. Together, they formed a formidable team not through biology, but through shared values and mutual respect. Julian watched them during executive meetings, feeling something he hadn't expected to find again: pride. Not in his revenge or his wealth, but in these 3 young adults who had chosen to align themselves with him despite knowing the truth of their parentage. "DNA doesn't determine destiny," Julian told them during a private family dinner at his penthouse. "Actions do. Choices do." They had all made their choices now. Nathan had legally changed his last name back to Marks. Isla used Marks Davis professionally. Even Leo, who maintained the most contact with Samantha, had begun introducing himself as Leo Marks in business settings. They weren't reclaiming a name, they were choosing one, along with the values it had come to represent. Julian hadn't expected this outcome when he disappeared a decade earlier. He had planned for retribution, not reconciliation. Yet here they were, building something together that transcended the betrayal that had once defined them all. The security team alerted Julian immediately when Margot appeared in the lobby of Marks Tower, demanding to see her son. At 78, she remained remarkably unchanged, the same perfectly coiffed hair, now completely white, the same tailored clothing, though visibly worn at the edges. Julian watched her on the security monitor for several moments before making his decision. "Send her up," he told his assistant. When Margot entered his office, her eyes widened at the spectacular view, the obvious wealth, the power that emanated from every detail. "Julian," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "You look wonderful." He gestured to a chair but remained standing himself. What do you want, mother? The directness seemed to startle her. Can't a mother simply wish to see her son? Julian's laugh held no humor. We both know our relationship has never been that simple. Margot's composure cracked. I need money, Julian. The trust isn't enough. My medications, the repairs to my condo. No, Julian interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. The trust provides adequately for your needs. Tears welled in Margot's eyes. I'm your mother, despite everything. Despite orchestrating the greatest betrayal of my life, Julian asked mildly. Despite lying to me for 15 years? Despite denying me the knowledge that the children I loved weren't biologically mine? Margot flinched. I thought I was doing what was best for Samantha. For the children. Julian nodded. And I'm doing what's best for me. You chose control. I chose peace. He pressed a button on his desk. Security will escort you out. Please don't come back, Mother. The past gets no more audience here. The annual shareholders' meeting of Mark's Innovations filled the grand ballroom of Wellington Grove's new luxury hotel, another property in Julian's growing portfolio. On stage, Julian presented the company's remarkable growth projections alongside Nathan, Isla, and Leo, each speaking about their divisions with confidence and authority. In the back row, Ethan Blackwell sat quietly, having purchased a single share of stock simply to gain entry. His hair had thinned, his once athletic frame now soft with middle age. He watched the family he had betrayed become the family he could have had, successful, united, powerful. Across town, Samantha watched the live stream of the presentation from her computer at the strip mall clinic, her lunch break spent staring at the man she had once deceived and the children who now stood proudly beside him. Julian never acknowledged Ethan's presence. He didn't need to. The contrast between them spoke volumes. The billionaire innovator versus the disgraced accountant. Success versus failure. Julian's empire wasn't built on Ethan's destruction. Ethan had destroyed himself. Julian had simply ensured he couldn't cause any more damage. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Julian stepped back, allowing his three protégés to take center stage. This, too, was deliberate, a public anointing of the next generation of leadership. Not a word needed to be spoken about the past. Julian's triumph was complete, visible in every aspect of his life, while those who had betrayed him watched from the margins, witnesses to the legacy they could have shared. 10 years after his return to Wellington Grove, Julian stood on the rooftop garden of Mark's tower with Nathan, Isla, and Leo. At 59, he had begun gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on mentoring the next generation and expanding his philanthropic work. The Julian Marks Foundation now funded everything from coding academies in underserved communities to breakthrough medical research. I've been thinking about something Mom said, Leo commented, leaning against the railing beside Julian. She called me last week, you know. Julian nodded. He never discouraged their relationship with Samantha or even Ethan. That was their choice to make. She said she regrets everything, the lies, the deception. But most of all, she regrets underestimating you. Julian smiled slightly. Many people made that mistake. Leo looked at him directly. DNA doesn't make a father. You taught us that. You showed us that. Nathan and Isla joined them at the railing, the four of them looking out over the city that Julian had transformed. Wellington Grove had become a technology hub, attracting talent from across the country. The Marks name now opened doors, created opportunities, symbolized innovation and integrity. Julian studied the three adults beside him, accomplished, compassionate, principled. Not his biological children, but his chosen family. His revenge had been thorough, but it hadn't consumed him. Instead, It had freed him to build something far more valuable than what he had lost. To the future, Julian said, raising his glass. As the sun set over the city he now owned, Julian Marks realized he had won not through rage or bitterness, but through silence, patience, power, and most surprisingly, love. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more emotional content like this, and share with friends who appreciate powerful comeback stories. Drop a comment below about what lesson resonated most with you from Julian's journey. Is it better to seek revenge or create success? What would you have done in Julian's position?